Okay, so this PowerPoint just kind of touches on things that you probably already know. Remember from Comp 1, different things we've done in here. Just talking about sources. Obviously, you are trying to find evidence that's supporting the subpoints of your argument. So just as a reminder of what we kind of talked about yesterday, I'll make this a little bigger for you. You should have your main idea and then decide on your subpoints. What are the elements of your argument that support your main idea, your main big argument? Some of you might have 3, some of you might have 4, some of you might have 6 subpoints. Everyone's going to be different depending on how much material you find per subpoint. We'll talk about how we're going to organize those paragraphs once we get into draft world. But essentially, like when I think of how this would work, you would add articles in order to support your subpoints. So things to remember, obviously you guys have to pick valid sources. You want to refer to the bias chart that I gave you as just kind of places to start. Be really open to the different types of Google searches, like try to reword your topic in as many different ways as possible to get different results. Try to Google your subpoints to see if that helps, but then try to be vague as well. And that might lead you to subpoints once you kind of go through and dig up some sources. And I can't emphasize enough, read, read, read. You guys are going to have to read a lot of different articles and sources in order to find the ones that are going to best support your argument. We obviously want to try to be as recent as possible. A rule of thumb is like the past 20 years. If you have an article that's outside of that, maybe just send it my way. It's not that you can't use it, but I just like to double check. Rule of thumb is about within the past 20 years. Now, if you're taking a literature course, obviously that doesn't apply because some of the literature you're going to study is old. But in the case of this type of essay, you want to avoid things that are recent as possible. Remember, opinion is not enough. So be open to these different types of sources. Interviews, that's a really underestimated resource that you could tap into. Finding those on YouTube, different like CNN, Fox, news stations that have interviews with people. Surveys, personal experiences, books, that's a pretty easy one to overlook as well. Even just to like hop to the library for a day and look at your topic, and you might end up finding a couple books that are really going to help support your claim. Obviously, scholarly journals, magazines, websites, newspapers are going to be the easiest things for you guys to access, but do not be eliminating these. And documentaries, that's another huge source that I don't think people tap into enough. So be open to that as well. You can absolutely use that as a source. So remember, bias and agenda, it's not always bad. You just have to be aware that your documents contain bias and agenda, and recognize that within your essay, and also when you decide to choose quotes. Don't try to be manipulative with information that's coming from a source that's clearly one-sided. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying you can't use those, because there could be some really great facts and figures. Just make sure your readers are aware, and that would be in the description, which we'll talk about that more. How do you cite sources and give credit? That's going to be more of an explanation your readers deserve when you're providing them with sources. We want to look for .edu, .gov, .orgs. Obviously, .com can be reliable, .net, but just be aware that you're going to have to double check to make sure that these are reliable sources, and we're going to review how to do all that. Obviously, look for errors or wrong facts. Those should be cues to you that it's not a good source for you to be using. What's the person, what are they associated with? Like, what organization are they coming from? A lot of times that's indicative. It'll help you decide whether or not you've got yourself a good source. Make sure you seek out someone's credentials, and it's an easy Google search. You find an article you really like, she or he does not state their credentials on the topic. A simple Google search will help you solidify